good afternoon. Afternoon, John Donovan, Oceanside, Marty Keller here in Sacramento, and we welcome Ken Kritt from Illinois. Moline, right? Where are you?
I'm in, well, this is the Quad Cities, which is near Moline, but I'm actually in Taylor Ridge. So,
Taylor Ridge, Illinois. Welcome. For those of you who don't know Quad Cities, that's over on the western border of Illinois, near the Mississippi River, as I understand it.
yep. I'm right on the Mississippi. I can see it as we speak.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Wow, that is nice.
So as always, we like to welcome guests to our podcast. And this is Ken's first time being with us. And we're grateful that you're taking out some time from your day to share with people who are watching this podcast about accountability practice. And what I thought we might do to get started is to ask you to share with us a little bit about your background and how it is that you came to be here. Kind of an open-ended softball question.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's really an honor to get to be with you too, and to be able to talk on this podcast. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So a little background. Where to begin? So I've been in recovery. I've been sober now for 23 plus years in the 90s. Which is also about the time that I went to prison. I was married, in business and all, and I was also an addict since I was a little kid, an alcoholic addict, and had never dealt with anything in my life, kind of like pushed that aside, and so I got into recovery through AA, and then I went to prison. I was arrested in the 90s, shortly after I had gotten sober, and worked a lot of programs. And I was fortunate to get into programs in the prison. And so I've been kind of working on all kinds of healing modalities and recovery things. I actually found ACA while I was in prison too. So that was early 2000s, a few years after after I've been sober, and anyhow, when I got out, I moved back to Chicago, which is where I was from, and worked there, helping run a sustainability business, got into the mushroom business, started a mushroom company, and as I was working to expand that, I was also doing some healing work in Iowa, in Des Moines, and dear friend of mine who I was working with in Chicago, we kind of had this idea like, well, maybe we should move out of Chicago, not go into the mushroom business, continue with the mushroom business, come out here. And that's how we ended up in the Quad Cities, which I had never heard of in my life. I didn't even know where it was, but by chance we just ended up out here. And then when we got out here, a little bit after we had gotten out here, my friend, they were looking up things and saw the laundry list online and looked up ACA and found that there were some meetings in the Quad Cities, and from there we met a couple, Dick and Marcia, who knew John and spoke very highly of him and kept telling me I should meet him, that we would get along well, and had a lot of similar kind of spiritual beliefs and things. So finally, I made the contact and called and started working with John, with you one-on-one for a while. And Marty, I started going to your Rusty Nail meeting on Mondays, which was amazing, and I love that. I'm not in it now because which is another part of my work and story through my experience. I'm in a restorative justice training right now on Monday nights, but I will get back to when that's over, I will be back because I love it. And I've been going on and off when I can to, John, to your meetings now that you have on Saturdays, which are amazing. And then I got into, you offered a training for people who wanted to take the work that you do, the accountability training, this work into kind of expanded to other places and to other things. And so I got in that training, that class with you and Marty and a bunch of amazing people. Like that's been incredible. Obviously, the training, the continued work with this, but also just the people are like that I've met in your community that have found so much through this. They're all amazing too. I know that we've introduced, I won't name names, but we've introduced friends to you, and I know some of them, or at least one in particular, is still like singing your praises and goes to. And what I want to say, and this is just to begin with on personal note, like, to me, John, you're the real deal. And it's just it's been such an honor to get to know you. I want to say like to me, I hear Marty you use the word guru, but in the past, but I consider you somewhat of like a mystic, like one of those mystics that, because I know that you're, when you really get into your all that you've learned and studied and know and experience within yourself, whether it's the Akashic record, I mean, I could go on, but there's like so many different spiritual things that you have like learned through, not just the practical, the stuff you've done in prison, the stuff that the men's work, and all of these different, I've probably read a number of books that you've referred me to and recommended, and and a lot of these, but it's also, you have the practical, and then you have the embodiment, the somatic, and the polyvagal. I mean, like, to me, everything that you talk about, it's all connected. And then you have the spiritual, because it has to be connected. The idea and the understanding is the connection to everything. And I really connect to that, the sense of inner beingness and connection. And so when, the question, like, who are you and how did you get here, to us, to me, like, that's a big question, because how, like, so we could talk about like ancestors,
Right.
and
How far back do you want to go?
right, all the things that create who I am, that brought me here, and that created who you two are, so that you met and did this work and started this podcast and everything else. And it's like, there's so much that goes into it. It's not just something that just happened. It's something, and there's something that you say, and I don't know if it's in one of your principles, but I've heard you say it, and I actually read it because I was reading back through the workbook, and it was something about here. The truth is that everyone makes the best decisions they can with the info that they have at the moment. Anything else is blame or judgment. And I love that, and I just want to say, like, I think about that because, like, when I got sober, I learned that my best thinking got me there, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
everything, like, I tried my best, and even the things, and I did some horrible things, like, I caused harm, like, I did things that went against everything I believe in. I hated myself, like, all my the kind of like what you talk about again in the accountability thing, like, have you ever done anything that you hated or whatever with that, and then you did it again, like that kind of thing. And like, I know those things, like, I know that in my own history and in my own life, and then working with people in prison, I've seen that from others. And and the reason why I brought that up now is because, like, I could be dead, I could be in prison still, or back in prison, or somewhere else, but thanks, yes, you know, we could say like the family of origin dysfunction and trauma and all that, but also thanks to my ancestors for whatever else I got and whatever else has been in my life, that it also led me in this road of recovery that
Yeah.
led me to you all. And I think that's how I think about this. And to me, that's really important and really impactful to understand that, because the person who did what I did and did it again and is back in prison, I'm no better than. And if I had been, and the way I think about no matter who it is, whether it was and I'm Jewish, you know, so when I say this, you know, whether it was an Adolf Hitler or whoever else that, you know, we can say is done these horrible things, like, I am no better than any of them. I'm no worse than the Mother Teresa maybe, but I'm no better, because if I had been born in someone else's shoes and went through whatever they went through, I would probably be doing exactly what they have done. And
Right.
the only reason why I'm here today with you all is because no matter what I went through, whatever else I had has led me on this road to recovery and healing and helping others and sitting here with you today. And
Wow.
that's
Wow.
kind of the way I think about it, and it really helps me. And being in prison was pretty, as you know, working in prison, like, it was pretty impactful, because I got to see all these beautiful people that, you know, if they had, like, you know, how did they end up here? And you know, like, it just really, um and then I guess the last thing I'll say, because it's all connected, but one of the things I love about your work and the accountability work, which is so connected to 12-step work and AA and
Yeah.
everything, I
Yeah.
can say a lot of that, but it really humanizes people. It takes away object, like instead of making people objects, and it really, like, makes life and people precious, all life. And that's
Right.
what I have found through your work, is it really humanizes and helps to see people as human beings versus like some label or some object. I don't know if that
Right.
makes sense, but that's something that I've
Absolutely.
seen in you so
Absolutely.
clearly. Thank you. That's a lot, but I hope that's all okay. I mean, there's a lot I could say, because I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about the work all of you do,
Yeah.
and how, you know, how fortunate I am and how it connects to a lot of the other things that I have learned, whether it's 12 steps. As you know, I'm involved in psychedelic healing, and see how that what you do, you know, and when you talk about, and I know, like, there's newcomers on here, you know, maybe they don't know all the terms, and like the, you know, the iceberg and the 7/8 on, you know, of subconscious, but, you know, like things like psychedelic work or IFS, or the combination of IFS and psychedelic work with what you do, helps us to bring the subconscious to this consciousness, to be able then to take your principles and make them more, and be able to maybe use them more, potentially more readily or
Yep.
quickly,
Yep.
possibly. So
Put
that's
the.
just,
I just listened to Dr. Joseph Murphy, who was probably the turn of the century, the beginning of the 20th century. And his opening statement was, we don't have two minds. We have one mind that, and it is conscious and subconscious. It's one mind. We're not two people in here. It's one person with conscious and a subconscious mind. And sometimes it feels like there's another person inside that's doing all these things that we don't want to do. And yet it is that subconscious mind that has been misinformed through family of origin dysfunction and childhood trauma that is acting out. And if you don't know it, that's what I mean by everybody's making the best decision they can at the moment, because that 7/8 of that trauma is active in my decision-making process. And as a little child, I was happy
and I got questioned. So somebody asked me a simple question in reality today in real time. This subconscious trauma comes up and is like defensive or attacking just because I heard a question. Instead, I wasn't even able to answer the question. I got emotionally, verbally, or sometimes physically violent. And that's what I was like, I don't want to do this. And yet every time somebody asked me a question I didn't want to answer or didn't know how to answer or was suspicious of their motives, this subconscious trauma would take over. In my defense, only I'm now, 50, 60, 70 years old, and I don't need defense, but this mechanism doesn't know it. And so, yeah, wow. Thanks, Ken.
Well, could I add to that? It's not just the family of origin dysfunction, childhood trauma, that is got this power, but it's also the way we're physiologically and mentally structured, so that when I had that initial response and created this defense as a little kid, my body then took over and kept it in place.
Yes.
Until something else came along to intervene and offer different information. My body, the way the brain is structured, is going to just self-reinforce year after year after year, which is why getting into healing on this is so stubborn, because the brain itself has been organized around keeping this subconscious belief system, defense system in place.
Yes.
Yeah, bringing in a little, connecting this to IFS. And IFS, for those that don't know, is Internal Family Systems. Richard Schwartz is the one who came up with it in the 80s. And it's, for me, it's been really helpful and amazing. But like the exiles, these are the parts of us, the traumatized little child, that those emotions as a little kid were too much. And they started forming these beliefs about myself. Like I'm bad, I'm ugly, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, whatever all my beliefs were. That's what I didn't want. I exiled them. They're called like and that's where the subconscious, like they're put away. And what happened was I formed these protectors, like you were saying, Marty, like at a young age, to manage and control, so that I don't feel, so that I don't remember, so I don't experience, so it stays in my subconscious. So that, and anytime something gets triggered, that triggers those childhood trauma, family of origin dysfunction, these protectors take over. And there's two types of protectors they talk about: managers, which are proactive, all the ways, well, if I just, do all these things right, then I won't feel these things. Or they might be things that keep me out of relationships, keep me at a distance, so that I don't feel these things. Even though I want connection, it also brings up all this trauma. And so I've formed these managers to keep me what that little child thinks is keeping me safe. It's actually not. It's actually doing. And all these things have good intentions, and addictions are what they call firefighters, or these things that I do so that I don't feel that stuff, but they're actually like more like reactive. They just, they're not like so much managing me as a more unmanageability. And that's where harm comes in: harming others, harming ourselves, addictions. And those are protectors. Those are also had good intentions. Like I would say my addiction kept me alive. If I didn't have it at 14 and 15 and 16, although I might have not, good chance I wouldn't still be alive.
Right.
It helped me, even though it hurt me and also hurt others. It did keep me alive long enough to get into recovery and be able to start my healing process. So I think like IFS has helped me to kind of like think about what you talk about in a way that really, like, I get to see this system and how I've suppressed and repressed and put into subconscious and formed these protectors to keep me from feeling these things, especially when these triggers come up.
Right. Wow. Good stuff. Really good stuff.
So I have an inquiry that I just see if you'd be willing to share a little bit more for the newcomer, because you rightly noticed or noted that there are people, hopefully people here watching this for the first time. So would you be willing to maybe just in your own words give the newcomer a sense of this? What are we talking about here? What is accountability from in your experience and your perspective, and what does that offer to this person who's suffering that compulsion? I found myself in an argument. This is John's great line. I found myself arguing, then I realized I was arguing the wrong side, and I kept it up anyway. Or I was about to harm somebody, and I realized I shouldn't do it, and I did it anyway.
Right. Thank you. Good question. So to start with, it's, no shame, no blame, no judgment, and taking responsibility for whatever is going on, that it's not the other person. It's always me. It's always, coming from my, trauma or family of origin dysfunction. And these are things that come out. And then I project, I'm thinking like, wait, this person's doing this, but it's really my projections of my own stuff. And that's really important, is owning my stuff. I can't change. And I will say, like, I want to connect this as I'm talking about it, because maybe some people are familiar that are watching early on, and they're in this, or maybe for the first time, but they may be familiar with AA, and it really is very connected to me to AA. If you go to an AA meeting, you'll hear people talk about, they get real honest, and they talk about their stuff, and they take responsibility. And one of the things I learned in AA in the 4th and 5th step was, it doesn't matter, we're not looking at other people. We're what part did we play? We're, taking 100% responsibility and accountability, and looking at our side of the street and seeing, because the only way I'm ever going to change is by taking responsibility. Blame and when I got into this program in prison, we got this orientation thing, and the first thing it said was, or one of the first things was, obstacles or blocks to change, and the first thing was blame. Because if I blame anyone else for what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, then I won't be able to change it. And that if I blame myself, I won't either, because blame and responsibility are two different things. And you talk about that, John, in the accountability work, is what is responsibility? And it's not blame. It's not self-flagellating. It's not beating ourselves up. When you say I am mean, I am needy, I know there are 5 of them, needy,
arrogant, entitled, controlling, mean, needy.
Right. So when you say these things, no shame, no blame, no judgment. It's not about, I'm bad, I'm this horrible person. That's not going to help. That's not taking responsibility. And learning that, because I haven't been taught that, because I was taught the opposite. I was conditioned to think that if I did something wrong, I am bad, and it goes right to shame, and it goes to who I am, not what I've done.
Right.
And then I get defensive, because that affects, that triggers all my stuff, right?
Yeah.
So your process helps us to look at, and same with 12 steps, and same with these other things, look at the parts that we play, the things that we're actually doing, and taking responsibility without shaming ourselves, blaming ourselves, and knowing that when something's going on, I need to look at me, and I need to look at my projecting? Do I think and that's a big part of this, and that was helpful. And then the other part that is so important is, which is to me something different that you do that some others don't, is the intention. What do you want then? What do you want that you don't have? What do you want that that you know, instead of this, if you don't want to be mean, if you don't want to be controlling, if you don't want to be neat, what is it that you do want in these situations? You know, and then you set these intentions, and you talk about the reticular activating system. Did I pronounce that right?
Yep.
Reticular
Yep.
activating, and how that works, and how that filters, like the, you know, like what it's, you know, kind of like, how do you say it? Like it kind of filters out, like you said, the thing that you say, the things that don't seem to like apply, like based on my
Right.
belief system or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's changing this, it's changing the belief system. So this process of feeling it in my body, like that's
Yep.
the other part, is it's also an embodiment, which is important because this is all in my body. And when I go to my body and I go to feel this, and then I say what I do want, what my intention, based on intention, then that can change these things that have been implanted in my, you know, through my childhood, like these
Yeah.
beliefs
It
and
it it changes the information that's in your subconscious. It reframes whatever trauma that led me to be mean, which was a good idea for me because it kept people away from me. It's in alignment with my trauma. When I say I'm mean, take that breath and have that feeling of the impact of what I'd done. That's not who I am, it's what I did. And so I can say, oh, I'm mean. Feel the pain that I feel myself, and then the pain I inflicted on other people. And in that feeling tone, say, I intend to be kind, I intend to be gracious. And that actually changes the frequency of the subconscious. It's a healing, takes the edge off the trauma. And I find myself automatically doing things differently. Um, and in alignment with what I intend now, instead of what I've been doing all my life to stay safe. Wow, good stuff, Ken.
yeah, well, your stuff, I mean, it is, you know, and that's Mahatma Gandhi, I think, says, like, be the change you wish to see in the world.
Yeah,
And if I want
yeah,
to have different relationships, or healthier or better relationships, I need to change. I mean, it's not about changing other people. When,
right.
as I change, my relationships change, and you know, really, it's yeah, I think that's, and I love, you know, I know I wanted to look because I kept that list available, your principles, um, and they all apply here. Like, I'm always getting what I want, and it's never about the other person, and that's so important. And I remember when I first started working with you, I was like really hurting and struggling because my best friend, who is the most amazing person, I love them so much, but things were hard, and I was like, I don't get it, because I know they're amazing, and like, why is this, why does this hurt, why can't I just be the way I want to be with them, like, and I knew it was not them, it was me.
Yeah,
But it was like, you know, and then I remember, because when I first started working with you, that was what was going on, and like, I wanted to be the best I could be. I wanted to be able to connect. I wanted to be able to, um, like, how you say, I don't know, there was something in your um, where was it? I had written this because I really liked it, and no, I can't find it. Oh well, it was just about um, well, I just know it was about being able to do it as something is going on in a relationship, being able to communicate what's going on and not without blame or shame, and being able to do this process in relationship in real time.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what we had talked about. And I think that's really important. I guess with that, I was going to ask you, John, have you ever done this? I know you have done this work with couples, but have you ever done this work in group with a group process? Have you ever worked with an organization or a group and the reason why I ask that is this new community that I'm starting up with mushrooms. I would love you to be like an advisor to pay you to, like, I was thinking, like, have you done group work around these principles, or has anyone taken
Yeah. 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 If you want me
And
to
John,
talk-
I'll come along and help you.
Okay, got it. Yeah,
Right.
I would love to address a group of people and all the dynamics that come up in an organization. When I first learned this new style of communication, I learned from a man who was an activist, and he worked with the Black Panthers, and he recognized that the activist group, fell apart before they could affect change because of emotional, verbal, and sometimes physical coercion inside the group. And the group fell apart internally before it could become effective. So teaching this nonviolent style of communication, teaching the accountability process, and getting into the feeling and being able to do that in a group where everybody's voice is heard and they understand that if they're not heard, there's something internal in them that is setting this up so that they can prove themselves right, whatever it is. But yes, I would love to address that as a group. It would be fantastic.
Could I jump in on this, Ken?
Yeah.
Because this has been an issue of major interest to me. I got my master's degree in consciousness studies about 18 years ago because I was interested in how does the group access its own consciousness? Or my experience is the group is unconscious of itself as a participant and a creator of a group dynamic. A group, we sometimes use the word group culture. And I believe that the process that we have going on here is got power to access that. And it can't be accessed, however, until we're accessing our own. That's why I love the accountability, because there's no way to us if I'm not in with me.
There you go.
So if all of us are starting with looking at what's going on with me, and that creates the possibility of looking at what's going on with us. Because oftentimes my experience in working in government and nonprofits and working with groups all the time, what I notice, and I don't know if this is parallel to what I think you're talking about, Melodonna, in terms of the Black Panthers.
No, it was a guy named Sinclair.
Okay, so with Sinclair, I'd love to talk to him about his insight into this, and because that breakdown occurs from my observation, because the group can't handle its own shame.
Right.
The group can't handle its own violence. We want to make somebody else responsible for it. And so how we actually can get into that and get a group agreement, no blame, no judgment, that's something I'd like to explore a lot more. Because I was thinking this morning about what's going on in Ukraine and thinking about, what can I do? Well, I'll tell you what I can do is I can learn to have peace inside myself.
Powerful. Powerful. And yeah, you got a team here.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Okay, cool. I'm excited too.
And I want to hear. I'd love to hear more about your experience with Sinclair and his work. Was it a he, or I don't know what?
Yeah. Hamish Sinclair.
Okay, yeah, that work, because that's really interesting, and obviously the organization, what we're creating, and actually one of the people in it is also knows you and works with you, but that's going to be helping organize. But it is going to be also activism, and it is, you know, the idea is we're doing something. It's going to be around mushrooms, but the idea is that we're going to do something that's going to help create, you know, as your part of your thing, you know, what do you want, you know, you know, I'm, you know, creating a world that works for everyone, so that the next generations, that our grandchildren and great grandchildren are going to have a plan, actually a planet that is healing, and we're all, you know, as Ruth Wilson Gilmore, another activist and wonder, I encourage anyone to look her up if they don't know her. But she says, where life is precious, life is precious. And I think about that, like how we, you know, in my statement, you know, that I have, where creating a world where everyone can see how truly beautiful and amazing they are, and everyone else is, and that creates a world that works for every living being on this planet, on this beautiful planet of ours. And that's the idea of this organization, is like, we want to like see the places in ourselves that are still creating disconnection. Where are my, you know, what part have I played, or do I continue to play in disharmony, in, you know, where are my you know, blind spots, those places, you know, that we learn through you know, your work, and do this through mushrooms, because, you know, we could get into a whole conversation on mushrooms, but you know, I know how valuable they can be to a more sustainable, loving world, for multiple reasons. But the other thing that I thought of when both you, Marty, and John, what you were saying is restorative justice. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but I also see this being real practical. And I'm doing some restorative justice training, and I'm by no way an expert, but I see it as a really valuable way to bring healing and bring people back into right relation that prison doesn't accomplish. Prison does the actual opposite. It disconnects.
Opposite. Yeah.
Right. And there's no accountability and responsibility in prison, you know, in the process itself. It
Right.
actually is the opposite. Whereas in restorative justice, you know, the idea isn't about shame or blame. It's about taking, you know, those that have caused harm and broken relationships to take responsibility and be accountable and be able to be in a place where they can, and those that have been harmed to be able to tell their story without shame or blame. Because that's not, then it puts people in defense. But at least if you start, like, you know, like, you know, obviously there's a lot of emotions. If I've been victimized and traumatized by someone, like, there is a lot of healing and a lot of work that I need to do, so that I can sit with a person, or potentially what I'm learning in this group is vicarious restorative justice. So it might not be with the actual person that caused the harm, but somebody else that represents that. And I can tell my story and be heard and be seen, and you know, without like making dehumanizing the other person. Because once I dehumanize them, then I cut off that, you know, that it makes it more difficult for somebody to stay present and be accountable and responsible. So, you know, like being able to do this work in restorative justice settings, so that actual healing can happen for those that have been harmed, and for those that have caused harm. Because like one of your things, your principles is hurt people, or hurting people hurt people.
Yep.
And so those people, by taking accountability and being responsible, then can get on their healing journey, so they don't have to hurt themselves or others anymore. So again, using this for those type of processes too, where we actually can bring healing and prevention versus what our justice system presently does that, you know, obviously isn't working. I could get in a whole thing on that too, but I'll hold off for now on that.
Okay.
Could I offer a practical consideration, which is what I notice even in our accountability meetings, and we're doing a lot of really good work, but what I notice is I don't know what your experience is, John, I'd love to hear it, but in my experience with the Rusty Nail group is it's almost like a collusion whereby when somebody does something that triggers somebody else, that somebody else never will raise it in the group context. So to me, what you're talking about, this notion of restorative justice, we can start that, practically speaking, in our groups when people get triggered. See my quotation marks here, get triggered by what someone else says, learning to be able to have a conversation with the other person and with the group about what happened to me. And John, you created that formula, I forget what it was called, that you shared with us in the facilitator group. But it seems to me that we can practice this in a very practical kind of way when we learn to have the courage to bring up something. Because how many times as a facilitator do I have people tell me after a meeting, boy, what that person said really pissed me off? And I'm like, would you consider raising that to the group? It belongs to the group. It doesn't belong to you if you're willing to think of it that way. So when you were raising the concept of restorative justice, writ big, we could start it by working on it writ small in our little groups.
Yeah, if you don't have it, you can't teach it. If you don't embody it, you can't give it to anybody else. Yeah, wow, I'm excited about all this. And I've looked at restorative justice as the up and coming, what this society is going to move to, based on the dismal failure of the correction system and the penal system and the judicial system. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to address this.
I'm excited too, and I love, Marty, what you said too about the groups and practicing that in groups, and that's even with, you know, like John, what you were talking about with our organization and how we can, you know, do those kind of practices, and that is what restorative justice is. And I think it's okay. I can't imagine they would have any problem. But the restorative, I love the restorative justice organization that I'm training in is in California. And they are amazing. It's called Ampersands Restorative Justice, and I'd love to give a plug. Alyssa Ackerman, who's a survivor, is the one who started this, and she's got a TED Talk. And I think that you would, John and Marty both, like, and those hopefully that are listening would see like how all of this connects and why it is so valuable. And that this, you know, we look at the problems in our society and the things that are not working, and we see that these things can actually change things and bring answers and healing and prevention, so that we don't continue doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And you know, that's insanity. So
send me, Ken, send me that link again, if you would, please, for the Ackerman one.
Okay, I will.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. I will get that to you.
Well, you know, it occurs to me that you were sharing with us what brought you to meet John, and what I recall is you were dealing with the relationship challenge. That's what you initially connected with John around. It's like almost on a one-on-one basis, this restorative justice principle could be practiced. And I think about struggles I've had with a very close friend over the last couple of years. And part of it was that inability to not only tell the truth to the other person, but to even know what the truth was. Because so caught up was I in blame and feeling victimized, And feeling victimized led to being justified. I'm justified at being pissed off at you. I'm better than you. And all of that horrible rat race or squirrel cage I found myself in. And then the other person's doing the exact same thing in his own or her own context. I mean, it's just we're two squirrel cages doing the opposite direction with each other, and learning to have restorative justice, because we are victimizing each other, we are hurting each other. I mean, we may not be killing each other, or we may not be ruining each other's property, or whatever the criminal justice system gets involved in, but it doesn't matter, because violence is violence, and separation and unwillingness to be in intimacy is the root of all this stuff, at least for me.
I can absolutely. I love what you said, and actually, the restorative justice, they do also do these one-on-one, and yes, because restorative justice, the whole idea is coming back into right relations, and so what would happen? Like what they do, you don't just sit together right away. There's a lot of work that's done
Right.
to prepare each party before they get there. So when they do sit down, they are ready to do a restorative process. And so like John, like what you teach and what you do would be would be part of that preparation to get
Yeah.
people in a place where then they can sit face to face with a facilitator, a restorative justice facilitator, and actually do this, have this restorative conversation, and each party, being able to speak without the blame, without the things that you were just saying, Marty. So I love what you said, and it's absolutely, and that's how this, the accountability work, this work that you are teaching and sharing can be used to help people, whether it's, intimate relation, friend relation, any relation, or anywhere that somebody feels like they've been, and in many ways, like there are, people that have been very much harmed or traumatized, like, and even in those processes, and especially in those processes, because otherwise it's something, and that's the thing about, if you listen to Alyssa Ackerman's talk, like how somebody who has been harmed can get healing from a process like this that they maybe couldn't get through years of therapy, or so it's an incredible process, and this work can help prepare people to be actually sit in
Yeah.
that and do that and be able to be in a restorative circle.
There's lots more that I would love to explore about this, and we're running out of time. So I hope that we can get you back in the future, Ken. So I'd like to, if you're open, I'd like to explore this in further detail. But before we wrap up, I'd like to get your thoughts about the relationship of psychedelics to trauma healing. It's a relatively new field, but there's a lot of research going on in that. And for those who are interested, you might check out Gabor Mate's The Gift of Trauma, where he goes into this in some detail. For those of you who don't know, Gabor, Gabor, Mate, Mate, if you're going to Google it, The Gift of Trauma. So Ken, in our remaining moments, would you be willing to share? I know I'm not giving you much time here, but maybe we could hit some highlights.
Yeah. So Gabor Mate definitely is amazing, and I feel I could say on that, and he's worked with ayahuasca, among other things, but I know that's been one of his. And I have been fortunate enough in my own personal experience to have been able to go to some retreats, and seen how that works. So first of all, you do it. The reason why it can help is kind of, we work with intentions, just like John, like what is our intention? What are we looking to get? And we start with intentions for our healing, and then like something like ayahuasca. I mean, each medicine, because MDMA therapy has helped so many people, like veterans, PTSD, Psilocybin has been, and I encourage anyone, two things. If you haven't seen Fantastic Fungi, I highly recommend that. The other one is A New Understanding, and that was done at Johns Hopkins, and it was done for people who have terminal illness, end of life type thing, and every time I watch it, I cry and I get angry. And I get angry, the anger is because why isn't this available? Like in our society, when you see every single person who had the terminal illness, who was given so much time, and they did the psilocybin therapy, they lost their fear and anxieties of death. It changed their whole relationship with the people in their family, and many of them lived a lot longer because they no longer had that stress of fear and anxiety. And that's what, a lot of people will say that some of the biggest spiritual experiences that they've ever had in these psychedelic therapy what do they call it, trials that have been done, that's why you're hearing like the FDA and DEA are starting to approve it. They've gone through these trials and shown how successful they are for a lot of different things. So I could go on, and there is a lot to talk about in this, but it's incredibly valuable. And I can just say for myself, in connecting to your work, where we talk about like I wanted to see the things that I struggle seeing, parts of me, that subconscious, those things that have, and I wanted to be able to see and relate to it from a different place. So, to recognize that I have this connection to God or to the higher power or whatever, and it actually is able to, so it takes away some of the fear, and I'm able to communicate to these parts and really get to know what they are, and then take it back. So I had this intention of doing this based on your work and other work that I do, to go into this work, to be able to see these parts and to have a relationship, to see my true self, not the conditioned or the old belief systems. And it's visceral. When you're with these, it's not just an intellectual, believe me, it's far from an intellectual process. It's a very visceral, experiential, and then you take it afterwards. That's where integration comes in, and you work with it, because just like in your process, once you've been shown these things, now it's time to work with them. And again, whether it's your process, IFS, or some of these others, it's really helpful, in order to sustain what you've learned, then you integrate it, you have an integration practice. And there's a lot I could say about that too. But so that's like a really short synopsis, because I could go on and on.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of benefits, and people are talking about microdosing and how that's helped people. There's a lot written on that too. So there's a lot I could say, and I think it's worth people at least doing their own research if they're looking for healing. Whether it's Gabor Mate, or there's lots of information now. What's his name? The book, What's on Your Mind. It's a big one. Forget it. He's the one. He's written about food.
Michael Pollan.
Michael Pollan's book. So yeah, that's I highly recommend that for those that have no experience or understanding yet about this. That's a great entry, because he does a great job of describing some things. And then, like I said, some of those videos, like Fantastic Fungi, will tell you a little more about the psilocybin, and same with the New Understanding. And there's lots of information out there. And we could do a whole podcast on that and how it connects to the accountability process, because MDMA is a great one. That's why it works for PTSD, to be able to help yourself be accountable, see these things, because it's the MDMA, from my understanding, and I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, it's just from my studies and everything I've read and learned and in my own personal experience, but MDMA slows down the amygdala, the fear part, so that you can go into these places. So for those that have, let's say, done harm, or those that are like, we talk about mean, arrogant, needy, all these things, it helps you to like say, wow, I am. And they feel the feelings, but not
Yeah.
overwhelmed. And so MDMA therapy is huge for this work. And really, I think it's great for restorative justice too, because it really helps people to like look and see, oh, yeah, I would say that that's a big thing that psychedelics does. It helps you to see yourself pretty good, and you're like,
Yeah.
there's no hiding from you, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is me, and you feel you feel not shame, but you feel the emotions, the empathy. I mean, I've seen it with other people. I've felt it with myself. Like you, like cry and hurt for like how you've affected other people, not in a shame way, but in like a way that makes you want to change. And I've seen addicts, I've seen addicts get sober because just one time with iboga. I have stories of people who've worked with iboga, ibogaine, and for opioid addiction, and they went through treatment, all these things, never did that once, saw their life, saw how they affected people, saw how they were fitting the real, and like went through this whole thing and never again touched it. And there's a lot of stories like that. I know people personally, but it's not just that. But I mean, that's why it's good for addiction. Even Bill W. we could talk about, but Bill W. Worked with. I don't know if you know. I mean, I think it's pretty well known now. But like after he was sober, he was still struggling with some other issues besides just drugs and alcohol. And he went to a therapist where it was legal to be able to do some psychedelic therapy, and it helped him. And that's when he started writing more about emotional sobriety. And I do know a therapist who knows the therapist he worked with, so I have some actual. But yeah, so that's a little bit. I mean, there's so much I could say about so many things, but thank you for asking, and I'm happy to talk more.
Yeah, well, we'll have you back. I think it's really important, before we turn this over to John for a wrap up. I noticed in myself, and I haven't done the psychedelics yet, but I noticed in myself and in other people that I came to a place where I'm doing accountability, and I'm an ACA and adult children of alcoholics, and I'm doing the work. And I came to a place where it was like I couldn't feel breakthrough into something that was I could feel it as an obstacle, psychic obstacle. It was like going, no further. So my solution at the time was, is I found a childhood trauma healing therapist, and learned other therapies that don't involve psychedelics, but involve some of the more advanced things that are being studied today. And it changed my life. The capacity to have this sense of an unmovable obstacle dissolved. Just I can't even get enough words. And so when I work with people and I see them come up against this obstacle, I can see it, I can feel it, and I can see them doing the work. They're doing attentions, they're doing accountability, and they're still over and over and over again finding themselves stuck. It's the time I say, you might want to consider getting some real professional help here. It's nothing wrong with you that you can't, that you aren't getting there yet. There's nothing wrong, but sometimes we need more help than this environment can provide.
Yeah.
So I thank you for sharing that, and I hope we'll get you back.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I guess the last thing I'll say is that I am sober. I've been sober for 23 years, and working with whether it was ayahuasca with these meds, has only made me even like, if anything, stronger in my recovery and I have no desire to drink. I have no desire to do do the things I used to, none. And it's, you know, that at first being an AA person, like no mind altering things, like nothing. And that kept me away for a while. And I think it keeps other people when it could really help them, like you said, break through other, you know, like places that they're still hurting and they may have been sober for a long time, but still maybe struggle with depression or anxiety or relationship things. And they can help somebody and help strengthen the recovery versus the other. So that's my opinion. These are, you know, Ken's opinions and Ken's experience and the people that I know in my life. But I just wanted to share that.
Well, again, thank you very much. So glad you could join us. And like we always like to do, let John have the last word. John.
When I was a child, we say family of origin dysfunction, childhood trauma. In my experience of my childhood, I was told that I was my behavior and that I was bad, somehow wrong, not enough. And this practice of intentional living accountability tree process separates me from my behavior so I can clearly see the behavior and the impact and know that and say that, and the essence of who I am isn't shame, because the behavior's always in alignment with what happened. And it's separating me from my behaviors and knowing that I am whole, perfect, and complete, although misinformed through my childhood dysfunction, childhood trauma, and that I can do something about my behaviors. I cannot change the essence of who I am. And this process enables me to see I want to use the word purity, innocence, authenticity, integrity that is me, and in use in owning the behavior, no blame, no judgment, and finding myself shifting automatically, sometimes magically, into what I say I intend from that awareness. So there you go. That's all I want to say.
Well said.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Ken. Just to let everybody know, the podcast is going to be on hiatus for a couple of weeks. We'll be back in the middle of March. And also, anybody who would like to participate in any of the accountability meetings that I and John participate in, stay tuned for the end of the podcast to get my email address or John's email address. And if you're interested in the meetings, we have meetings on Monday and Thursday night at 6:30, Tuesday afternoon at 4, and John facilitates a meeting Saturday mornings at 8:30. That's all Pacific time. And after mid-March, I'm going to be starting up a meeting on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Pacific time for people who are dealing with chronic diseases. We're going to explore all of this stuff that we've been talking about in terms of healing, looking at healing from those debilitating challenges from back pain, or I have Crohn's disease, or other kinds of long-term things, and take a look at how much our thoughts have to do with that. So we look forward to that. So again, thanks, Ken. Thanks, John. And we'll see everybody in mid-March.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Marty. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, thank you, Marty. Thank you, John.